Resuming debate, reprise de débat. The honourable member for Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboine, Headingley.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Now, I think the Liberals think that they got ahead of this, that they cut us off at the pass. But the fact of the matter is that nothing has really changed, Madam Speaker. The carbon tax cover-up, it continues, and I'll tell you why. I've got in my hands the article from the CBC that they're smiling. They've got big smiles on their face across the aisle. Oh, we sure pulled one over on them. You know what it says, Madam Speaker? It says, CBC filed an access to information request for the unpublished data. I can't say his name, but you know who he is, the Minister of the Environment's Department. Proactively disclose the data to CBC and other journalists and post online. Here's the catch. CBC's access to information request has not been fulfilled. Wow. So what else is it about the carbon tax that the government is continuing to hide? Nothing has changed, and our motion is completely in order and appropriate. Now, we did learn one thing. We learned that they're going to tank the GDP by $20 billion in this article. That's what it says, that the carbon tax by 2030 is going to cause the GDP to fall by $20 billion from $2.68 trillion to $2.66 trillion. That's about $1,200 a family across the country, Madam Speaker. So let me tell you what the Parliamentary Budget Officer told me and what he is really concerned about. Here's the exchange from the committee meeting last week on Monday. Mr. Giroux, in your earlier testimony, this is me asking, you said that you understood that the government had economic analysis on the carbon tax that it has not released. Are you saying that the government has not been transparent with the analysis it has? His response, I mentioned that the government has economic analysis on the impact of the carbon tax itself and the output-based pricing system. We've seen that, staff in my office, but we've been told explicitly not to disclose and reference it. Now, then I ask, the government has given you their analysis, but they have put a gag on you, basically saying you can't talk about it. Mr. Giroux, that is my understanding. Now, Mr. Giroux continues on later to say that the government's analysis confirms the report that the PBO had already published, finishing by saying, quote, that's why I'm comfortable that with what we have already published. In other words, he's saying when he said that Canadians are worse off, that the government's data confirms that. And I'm going to elaborate on that a little more in a moment, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, I followed up with him and I asked, are you saying the report the government did on the carbon tax, the report that they provided you confirms the analysis that you have done on the carbon tax? Then he had Mr. Mathieu from his office come up and say that Mr. Giroux had filed a formal information request to the Environment and Climate Change Canada asking for the underlying economic impacts related to the emissions reductions that the government published related to the carbon pricing back in late March or early April. They provided us with their estimates on real GDP, on labor income and capital income, and they indicated on the response form that these were confidential and that we could not disclose. That's the exchange. And so began the carbon tax cover-up, which continues to this moment, notwithstanding the pieces of information, the incomplete information that the government has decided to give to the CBC. We're going to find out what the rest of that information is, Madam Speaker, by the way. Don't you worry. We're not going to let this go until Canadians know the complete truth about the carbon tax. The department gave the data to the PBO. And you know what? The data confirmed, according to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, it confirmed his findings that people pay more. And they tried to muzzle him from talking about it. And the only reason they released these bits and pieces of data that helps make their case, and the only reason they say again that 8 out of 10 people are better off, is because Conservatives put them under relentless pressure and embarrassed them into doing something about it. But they've made it even worse, because giving out part of the truth is in itself misleading Canadians. You need to put out the whole story. And the whole story will say, when we finally see the report, when hopefully CBC actually, their access to information report is actually granted, we will see what the Parliamentary Budget Officer is saying, because I have no doubt in the veracity of what he's saying, is that the government's own data confirms his findings, that Canadians pay more in carbon tax than they get back. Now, those were his findings. Now, fast forward a year, the PBO announces that he made a slight error when he prepared his report, but he doesn't believe it will change his findings. The Liberals seized on that error, seizing an opportunity to attack his credibility, attack the PBO, who is an independent officer of Parliament, which is shameful, Madam Speaker. In fact, they attacked him in committee, and that's when Mr. Giroux said he's received government data that confirms his results. We don't see that in the CBC article. The government held that back, Madam Speaker. They have to release it. You can't make this stuff up, Madam Speaker. On November 4th, 2015, the Prime Minister wrote in an open letter to Canadians saying that the government needs to be open by default. It's a famous letter. It's been quoted in this House many times. Those were high-sounding words, Madam Speaker. The problem is, like most things, it just wasn't true. Governments that are open by default don't silence independent officers of Parliament. But that's exactly what he did, and they're still doing it because the information they released doesn't confirm what he told committee, which is that Canadians pay more than they get back in rebates. That's the truth, and that's what the government needs to own up to. Now, for 2 years now, the Prime Minister has been misleading Canadians. He's been saying that the PBO found that most Canadians get back more in carbon taxes than they pay. He said it again, by the way, to the FCM, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, just a few days ago. Did anyone catch that? Wow, that was quite a show. The mayors and the reeves and the councillors at the FCM, the Prime Minister said, 8 out of 10 Canadians get back more than they pay, Madam Speaker. And they started laughing at him. They started laughing at him. They booed him. They booed him off the stage because they know, like Canadians know, that it's just not true. It's not true, Madam Speaker. He knows it.
The Honourable Deputy House Leader knows full well that if he has questions and comments, he should wait till the end, and I would ask other members not to try to engage him. So the order.
Even the House Leader, too.
I think there's some on both sides. Yes. The Honourable Member for Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, has 3 minutes still.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. He got booed off the stage. You know, Canadians know it's not true. All they have to do is look at their energy bills. They know that when you tax the farmers who grow the food and the truckers who ship the food and the grocers who sell the food costs more. I like to call it, Madam Speaker, trickle-down taxation. So this debate has been raging for 2 years. The Prime Minister gets up and says Canadians get more rebates. The PBO says not so fast. When you consider the trickle-down economic effects, they pay more. That's the truth, Madam Speaker, but don't take it from me. No, you don't have to take it from me. And I know the members opposite won't take it from me. Yeah, but, and you don't even have to take it from the Parliamentary Budget Officer, Madam Speaker. You know who they should take it from? The Prime Minister. His own Deputy Minister of Environment did the analysis. He crunched the numbers. He sent the numbers to the PBO, and even under the threat of a gag order, the PBO spoke truth to power. You know what he said? He said in committee, it confirms the report that we have published. That's why I'm comfortable with what we've already published. So the Prime Minister who says he's open by default knows the truth, that Canadians pay more. He's hidden the facts, stonewalled opposition, and gaslit Canadians for too long. Madam Speaker, it's time to end the carbon tax cover-up, and that brings me to the point of this motion. We're asking for an order of the House to issue to the government for a copy of the government's economic analysis on the impact of the federal fuel charge and the output-based pricing system referenced in response to the Parliamentary Budget Officer's information request, provided that it shall be laid on the table in both official languages without redaction no later than Monday, June 17th, 2024. We're asking the Prime Minister to live up to his own words, to be open by default. It's time to end the carbon tax cover-up and let the people know the truth. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Government Deputy House Leader.
Well, this is the second day in a row, Madam Speaker, that Conservatives are having a bad day. Because the reality is, Madam Speaker, yesterday we saw them fumble all over the place, saw the Leader of the Opposition take all the questions away from his backbench so he could pick a fight with the Deputy Prime Minister.
I'll have the Honourable Member. So again, I want to remind everyone in the House to please be respectful when somebody else has the floor. The Honourable Deputy Government House Leader. Yeah.
And so what we've learned, what this member should have learned, although he probably would have just got the information moments ago, is that if you actually look at the data, and the data is holistic, this is all of the data that the PBO got. If you look at that data, Madam Speaker, it tells you two very important things. The first thing is that we've reduced emissions by 25 million tons per year, and it's continuing to increase in terms of our reduction of emissions. And the second thing it tells you, point blank and very clearly if you read the data, is that 8 out of 10 Canadians get back more than they put in. I've actually done the math myself, Madam Speaker, on what I get, what I pay versus what I get, and I know I get more. I'm wondering if this member has done the math on his, in terms of his rebate that he receives.
Hold on, the Honourable Member. Let me recognize the member first. The Honourable Member Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I have to say, hearing that member has done the math does not give me a lot of comfort. But the reality is, I wish he would give us the information he's talking about.
Exactly.
The CBC's access to information request was denied. What they did was they released pieces of information that support their narrative. They didn't release all of the information. So I maintain the carbon tax cover-up continues. That report, that data, all of it needs to be tabled in this House now.
Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de...
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Saint Jean. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The motion before us today asks that there be an economic analysis on the carbon tax, but I would say that we need to look at this on a much more macro level, the economic analysis when it comes to climate change. And so that should include, and we don't see it in the motion from the Conservatives, that should include, for example, the costs of climate inaction, on insurance, for example, on healthcare costs for risks linked to pollution. So I'd like to know, why isn't that in the motion? Is it because, according to the Conservatives, there's no cost to climate inaction?
The Honourable Member for Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
Well, I appreciate the question from the member, but what we're talking about here today is a very fundamental obligation of a government to the people. And that obligation is to always tell them the truth. And that's what this motion is trying to get at, the truth. It's time for the government to stop stonewalling Canadians, stop gaslighting Canadians, and tell us what their data says. The Parliamentary Budget Officer said it confirms his results. Where's that data? Bring it here. Table it right now.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Winnipeg Centre.
Yes, Madam Speaker. You know, once again, we have an Axe the Facts Day. And I do want to know some facts. I want to know why the leader of the Conservative Party is avoiding getting security clearance at a time of foreign interference. I want the facts on that instead of another day where the Conservatives spin and axe those facts. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
There's a standing order somewhere, Madam Speaker, that says the question should be about the motion. So I'll leave that question for another day.
Resuming debate, reprise de débat. Oh, sorry, I have a time for a brief question. The Honourable for Calgary, Rocky Ridge, sorry.
Madam Speaker, my question to the member is, can he just explain, does he have any explanation for the reflexive secrecy? Like, how on earth could it possibly come to the Parliamentary Budget Officer having to resort to A-tipping the government to get information from them? Secrecy by default is this government's MO. Does the member agree?
Hold on. Let me recognize the honourable member first. The honourable member Charles Wood St. James Assiniboine Henley. A brief answer, please.
I can't wait to talk, Madam Speaker. I'm sorry, but I agree with his statement. The reality is that the truth doesn't help them. They've been lying to Canadians for 2 years, and it's a tangled web that you weave when you lie to Canadians for 2 years, and your own data comes out and shows that you've been lying. So, but
a point of order. The Honourable Government Deputy House Leader.
He is specifically saying that members of this House are lying, Madam Speaker. You know that he can't say that.
I have another point of order. The Honourable for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
No, I don't have a new point of order. I'm speaking to his point of order.
And that's what I said.
Correct.
I have another point of order.
Yes. Speaking of the point of order, I listened very carefully to the member, and he did not accuse a member of Parliament of lying, which would be against the rules. He pointed out that the government has not told the truth, and the government has lied in its response.
I think I've heard enough on the point of order. I would just remind members not to use the word lying in the House. It causes disorder. This has clearly caused disorder. I would ask the honourable member to rephrase his response. The honourable member for Charles Wood St. James Assiniboine Headingley.
Sure, and that's all fair, Madam Speaker, but the truth is that they have not been telling the truth to Canadians. The Prime Minister has misled Canadians for years. They have data that shows he's been misleading Canadians. That's what this is about. They need to come clean. They need to give out all the data now so Canadians know the truth about the carbon tax. Thank you.